welcome to the Momversation Club, the podcast born out of the idea that every mum needs a tribe. I'm Claire Strong.
And I'm Christina Struckmeyer. We're two moms just like you, navigating the chaotic, challenging, and often isolating world of motherhood.
Now, it's said that it takes a village to raise a child, but in today's crazy world, we want to know where the F is that village?
It's a question that resonates with so many of us who find ourselves raising children, managing careers, and trying to maintain our own identities, often with a sense of isolation.
But we're here to remind you that you're not alone. The Momversation Club is your village, a place where you feel valued, appreciated, and understood.
We believe that by sharing our own experiences, successes, and even struggles, we can create a virtual village for all you amazing moms out there.
So join us every week for an honest, raw, and relatable discussion about all aspects of being a mom, including the stuff you just can't talk about with anyone else.
So if you've ever asked yourself where the F is the village, then you've found your tribe. So let's get into it.
Hi, Christina.
Hey, Claire, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I feel on top of it this week. I have recently come into the world of mainstream education, and I went ahead and signed up for the PTA/PTO. They call it different things at different schools, but I am a PTA mom.
Oh my God, congratulations. Now that's quite the commitment.
It is.
Yeah, well, what have you signed yourself up for?
I know. Well, I showed up to the meeting, and per usual, because this is my personality, I walked in and I was like, so I'll be taking over, right? Like,
oh my God, you did not.
A little bit. So I realized that they didn't have a social media presence. And so I volunteered to be the social media manager for the PTA at our school.
That's great. You'll be really good at that, Christina, because I don't know whether our listeners know this, but you do all of our social media. You are the Momversation Club social media manager.
I'm the behind the scenes man. Yeah, I mean, we do it together because we create content together. But yeah, like the logistics and like the posting and all that is me. And it's really something I enjoy. And so I'm excited to like jump into that. But also I feel like I have to hold myself back at those meetings, or else I try to take on all the committees and all the things. And I have to be like, Christina, you are but one person and you have two children and responsibilities of your own. Like, don't be the yes man. It's so hard.
Yeah, you're a bit like me in that way, though, because it's not that I'm compelled to be the yes man. It's because I get really enthusiastic about stuff and I get really passionate about stuff. And if it's something that I think that's up my alley, I'm like, oh, I'm all over it. Yeah. And then by the time I've realized I've committed to a massive thing that's going to take up so much of my time. Oh, and by the way, these things are usually free, so you're not even getting paid. Obviously, no. PTA is a voluntary organization. So it's like,
totally. Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of commitments, we're going to be talking about some commitments in today's topic.
We are talking about some commitments. So today's episode is dedicated to what is the best age gap to have between your kids. Now, the interesting thing is you and I have different age gaps between our kids. I've got a very short one, which actually was deliberate. I deliberately wanted a short one. You have a much bigger age gap between your girls. And so we're going to chat about how that has played out for us, what society suggests is a great age gap, and just really kind of the pros and cons and the reality, I guess, of having kids at different stages, whether that be very close together or far apart or somewhere in the middle. So you go first, because I want to know what it's like, because you've now got a 10-year-old and a 10-year-old. So how is that playing out at home?
So wild to me that I have a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. I'm like, when did the 10-year-old become a 10-year-old? Like, that's so... I feel like it just jumped. She was 4 and then she was 10. And it was like, holy crap, what happened?
I hear you, yeah.
Yeah, and so obviously big age gap. We got 8 years in between them. And it wasn't my original plan to have that big age gap. I always envisioned myself as having, a child, and then maybe a couple of years down the road, having another child. I thought maybe I'd have 2 to 3 kids. But after we had our first, and I was in my first marriage, it was a lot to have the one. And I didn't realize, I guess, I don't know how I didn't, but I didn't realize how hard it was going to be a mother and like to be a good one, and the time commitment and kind of like the balance of career and all of that stuff. And so I kept putting it off, like that second kid, like, oh, well, maybe in a year we'll revisit, or maybe in 2 years. And then it became 3. And then by the time she was 4, we were entering that stage of like, do we even want to be together? And so we didn't have a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I was okay with that. I was okay with having an only child. And I really loved that piece of it, of having this like little buddy. And then, I got remarried, and the person I'm married to, my husband, Alex, I'd have 100 babies with this man. He's so wonderful and supportive and loving and such a good father. And, but I'm 35. So I had to, figure out like how many actually are we having. So we had one after we got married. We were pregnant pretty fast. And so, we have this age gap of 8 years, but again, not by planned, a situation. I kind of like it. And I want to share a couple of reasons why I do like it, but there are some things to consider if you're going to purposely do a large age gap. I think of like 4 years or more, because there are some stuff, that comes in that. My favorite thing about having this age gap has been the one-on-one time that I got with each child. So for my oldest, Stella, she was my little buddy, my only one, for a really, really long time. And so that meant all of my attention went towards her. Story times and the play groups and all of the stuff was just about her. There was a lot of one-on-one time reading and playing and interacting with her without any other siblings to kind of steal attention away. And then when it came to like interactions with the other kids, I would bring her to those community groups as kind of a sub in for the sibling, because we didn't have one. And I didn't want her to be like this selfish one only child, So because of that, I also, with the 8-year gap, I get that with this baby, with my toddler. Mm-hmm. I'm getting that same one-on-one time because my older one goes to school during the day. When it's not summertime, I'm getting all of this one-on-one attention with just her. And I'm getting that same level of like feedback from her that I got with my oldest. So there's a lot of like one-on-one time without having to carve that out from like a weekend or something. So that's been really nice. Yeah. I know a lot of parents struggle with that, of like divvying up the attention.
So here's the deal. There's only 2 years, 3 months between my girls. So I did intentionally want a small age gap because at the time, so I was on my first marriage. And if I'm honest, I'm disclosing quite a bit of sensitive information here. So I got Sophia, my eldest, and I was perfectly happy with her. And I did have in my head, I would like to give her a sibling. It was more for her, honestly, Christina, than it was for me, because I was more than happy with just the one. And so I had in my head, okay, I should give her a sibling. I think that's the right thing to do. It's not that I didn't want a second child. I would have just been okay with one if another one hadn't have happened for whatever reason. And this is the bit that I'm going to be a little bit open and honest. My then husband and I were going through quite a rocky patch after our first child. And I honestly decided that, well, if we're having a second child, we need to do it now, because I don't know how long the marriage is going to last for. And I may never get remarried or meet someone else. And I really wanted to give Sophia a sibling. And so that, if I'm being honest, came into play when I made that decision. And although, the marriage was 50-50, whether it was going to work out long term, I felt, well, at least I've done my bit for Sophia, which might be a bit weird, but I'm sure other moms out there feel that pressure of giving their child another brother or sister.
Totally.
I don't know why we feel that way. And my mom's an only child. And I mean, I had a brother, so I wasn't an only child, but my mom was an only child, and she always tells me how much she enjoyed it. My now husband is an only child, and he enjoyed it too. So I know there are lots of only children out there who've had a great childhood and they don't feel that they missed out. But for some reason, I was compelled to feel the other way. And I really wanted to give Sophia a sibling. As it turned out, I had another girl, so I've got two girls pretty close together. And that's the downside. I'll start with that. The downside is exactly the opposite to your positive side. The downside is, so I only had 2 years with my first, and then the second one came along, and then the second one just had to fit in with the first. So wherever I was
Ah,
going with Sophia, whether it was like mum and baby group or that type of thing, Eva was in tow. Now, Eva obviously has grown up not knowing anything different. And so that I would say is opposite to your experience. So I didn't have a lot of quality one-on-one time with the girls. But then the flip side to that is they are close in age. They've always shared similar interests. They've both been into dancing. They like similar music. They like similar things, similar clothes. And so they have been able to play a lot together and relate to one another in a way that I don't think they would have been able to have done had there have been a big age gap. The other thing I will
yeah.
say, though, as much as that's positive, because they are close in age, oh my God, there's so many fallouts. I mean, 50% of the time they hate each other. 50% of the time they're best friends. And, they wear each other's clothes without asking. We've got all of that going on because my girls are teens now. Oh my God, she stole my top. And the worst thing is, Christina, never get them the same thing. It's just a nightmare because, if it's the same top or the same makeup, whatever it is, if it's the same, I can guarantee to you there's going to be World War III about who's taking who's top. It's just crazy. So please don't get the same of anything. At least get a different color, or at the very least, write your names on it for goodness sake. So that's just like a higher overview of how I've, the positives and negatives, I guess, of the age gap between my girls.
And now a quick break in the Momversation to bring you a word from today's sponsor.
Raise your hand if you love shopping for jeans. Well, if you're listening with a hand up, then you're in the minority because for most of us, it's a nightmare.
Waist gaps, unclear sizing, fluorescent lights, unflattering fits. I am sweating just thinking about it. What if we could skip all of that and just have the perfect pair magically transported to us?
Well, that's where today's sponsor, Neems Jeans, comes in. This women-owned business was created by someone who understands the struggle and offers custom denim jeans made to your exact body measurements, delivered right to your door.
Neems Jeans gives you the perfect fit every time, guaranteed, and offers inclusive sizings for every body. Moms, you are one of a kind, and your jeans should be too. Visit neemsjeans.com and use code Momversation15 at checkout for 15% off your order.
That's NEEMS jeans.com and code Momversation15 for your special savings.
Yeah, so with your age gap, it sounds like the best things about it were like the little buddy aspect of like them having that sibling relationship, being in the same season during the same time. What about you?
Yes.
So you had, gosh,
That's
a
an interesting
2-year-old
question.
and a newborn?
Oh, well, I don't
So were they
really think
potty
it's
trained? Like,
easy,
what
right,
was the
Christina? So
situation with them?
oh my God. So, well, listen, to add insult to injury, I decided to move countries when my second one was 3 months old. So I moved to
Perfect.
France from England with my 2-year-old, my 3-month-old, and my then husband, who we were kind of on the rocks. But we went there for a fresh start, and I was there for 3 years. So to answer your question, I had a toddler who was still in nappies, still in diapers, who actually still sometimes would wake up in the night wanting a bottle of milk. And then I became a single parent, and I was living in France on my own in a remote hunting lodge in the middle of the French countryside. So as I've said, I don't do things easy. So I was, honest to God, the first year, if not the first 2 years, I was just a walking zombie because I'd got two really young children that very much needed me. I was a single parent and I didn't have anyone around me because I was living in a different country. And so it was for me, I don't know. I remember thinking to myself, I don't think I could hold down a job right now. I mean, I was teaching Pilates on the side, just to bring some money in. But I wasn't working as a journalist at that time. I wasn't doing my, which is, my career. I remember thinking, there's no way I could regularly commit to showing up for a morning news anchor shift. I'm getting no sleep. I don't sleep. I'm up about 5 times a night. And then, the days are constant because you've got two babies, basically a toddler and a newborn.
Yeah.
And then even when Eva became a toddler, Sophia was still young. She was, 3, 4. And yes, she was at nursery at that time, but you can't just, oh, I'm going to go and take a nap and leave them to fend for themselves. I mean, it's not safe. I didn't have anyone to watch them, and so I was exhausted. So I will say that I think if I'd have had the support network around me, so had I have had a supportive partner, which I did not, had I have had my family around me, which I did not, I think it would have been slightly easier. But you know what? Even if, I had have been back in England with my mum and dad there, and I had had a wonderful, supportive husband, it still falls to you as the mum a lot. So regardless of
Yeah.
your support network, it's hard. It is. So
Yeah.
that is, I'm not saying to anyone that may be listening and they're thinking of having another one, maybe they've just got one right now and they're thinking, how soon should I have another? I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm not telling you not to do it. There are lots of benefits. However, it is full on, and it's full on in those early years, particularly. And then now, my girls are in teenage years. They need me in a different way. They're very emotionally dependent on me still. And so I'm still dealing with meltdowns. They're just over different things and on a different level. But
Yeah.
some days I'm emotionally drained from the girls. Not that they're intending to do that to me, but they obviously unload on me because I'm their person. And I love the fact that I'm their person, but it is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about like the zombie walk of like those early years, and I feel like
Yeah.
there's pros and cons for them to be in that same season of life because there's pro of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, if I'm gonna be a zombie once, I might as well be a zombie times two and just get this over with, and
Yeah.
be able to not be in that zombie walk when they hit an age where I guess they don't do that. I don't know, haven't hit that yet. Um, but then, as they get older, it sounds like when they're in the same seasons, they're having the same issues. So they're compounded. You're
Yeah.
not dealing with one angsty teen, you're dealing with two at the same time. You're not dealing
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
one child who's just starting school and learning about friendships and like dealing with their first like stuff with, social stuff. You got two. And so it's a lot on you, like to handle that emotionally and also
It is.
logistically of like who's on first with all the kids and where they're going.
Yeah, totally. Interestingly, though, I have just had my nephews stay with us. They are 8 and 10, so they came
Yeah,
over
you
from England.
did.
They live with us for 3 weeks in our house, which is not we have a 3 bedroom house. It's not like we live in some sort of mansion. So it was interesting because I felt I was parenting the boys and my girls because my mum and dad had brought the boys over, and I think my mum and dad they didn't realize quite how much work the boys are because they don't usually have them for that long, and so
Yeah.
it was very much like, "Hi, Claire, we're here with the boys. Over to you." I was like, "Thanks, mum and dad." And so it was a double whammy for me because I haven't got boys. I've never had boys. And so boys are very different to girls, very different. They're
Yeah.
very physical, they're boisterous. They like wreck things, they jump on the bed and break the bed, that type of stuff, which I've never had with the girls. Um, but there are some nice things to them as well. They're very sweet and very loving. But
Yeah.
interestingly, so I took all four of them to SeaWorld, which is, near me because I live in San Diego. And so that's where I took them out for the day. So I was on my own with the four of them. So age ranging from 16 to 8. And there's two girls and two boys. So we had 16, 13, 10, and 8. And Sophia, my elder, she said, "Oh, mum," said, "this is so funny. You know that everyone's going to think that, yeah, you're our mum to all four of them." I was like, "Oh God, yes, I'm sure they do." But it was so interesting for me because it did give me a glimpse into having kids at different ages and stages and different sexes too, because they're very different. And the boys, they'd be, they really love the girls, but they don't respect the girls as adults because they're obviously not adults. And so the girls would be saying things like, don't run off, you need to stay with us, but the boys would still run off, and that would really irritate the girls. So I experienced the girls trying to almost parent the boys because they're older and more mature, and they can see dangers more than the boys can. But the boys were kicking back against that. They were like, "You're not
Yeah, you
telling
got a
us."
little preview of that sibling stuff.
Yes, you're not telling us, you're not our mum, that type of thing. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this would be a lot. I've got to say though, my sister-in-law does have 4 kids. We should have got her on here as a guest today. She wouldn't have done it, Catherine, if you're watching. I know you wouldn't have done it, but she would have been great on here because she has 4 kids, and their age ranges are even more extreme than what I was just talking about. Her youngest is 10, her eldest is going to be 25 this year, and so she has 3 girls and a boy. And honestly, she is my hero. I don't know how that woman is able to function.
It's a lot of
Let
kids.
alone hold down a
That's
career.
a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot, but the ages are a lot as well. So she's still got
Yeah.
10's still very young.
Yeah.
And then she has a full-grown adult daughter who, obviously could very well be off having a family of her own by this age. And then she's dealing with a 14-year-old, and 14-year-old girls are very, very emotionally needy. And then she has a 19-year-old son. And so I don't know how she does it, because what I did notice is when I had the 4 of them at my house for 3 weeks, my second daughter, so Eva, who's 13, I felt that she felt she was being left out a little bit, and it wasn't intentional, but my attention was just split into 4 all the time. And so
Yeah.
she'd want my attention. I was in the middle of sorting out the 8-year-old. So I'd be like, yeah, 1 second, Eva, can you just do that on your own and I'll be with you in a bit? And it was 50-50 whether I would be with her in a bit, because something else would have happened by then. And I
Yeah.
thought, my God, if this was actually my life, this would be hard to navigate.
Well, I think also, yes, there's a lot in that whole conversation of like just the preview of what that was like. But yeah, there is, but going back to that one-on-one time, it is hard to navigate when you have more than 2 even. You're only one person. If
Yeah.
you have a spouse, like then you have a little bit of a tag team, but then it can feel like when you have a spouse and you have multiple kids that you're kind of like, all right, you're it. All right, you're it. And like, where's the partnership piece if you have a lot of children? But yeah, I think there's a lot to consider when it comes to like your attention as a mother and what you're able to do and what you aren't. As far as like the people I've talked to about age gaps, I've been in the mom circuit for a minute now with such a big age gap. And that's kind of the first thing that the moms in the moms groups will ask you, like, oh, is this your only, or are you guys having any more? It's kind of like a conversation that comes up a lot. And a lot of moms say that they're shooting for that 2 to 3 age gap. Like that's kind of like the sweet spot where most moms feel like that's the time. But a lot of people like myself, the reason I didn't go there with that 2 to 3 was, like you said, some marital issues that was causing me to be like, I don't know about that. But also like the idea of I just got to this point and now I would have to hit reset and go all the way back to the newborn stage. I think that's like a reason why a lot of people consider that gap, whether it's going to be short or long, is how did you handle the first one? What was the temperament of the baby? What was your mental health like? Like there's a lot of considerations with that, because when you think about hitting reset, for me, that gives me a lot of anxiety because I, on my last pregnancy, didn't have a great time. So that would mean maybe that would happen again. And it's like, oh, I don't know about that. I mean, what are your thoughts about hitting that reset? I mean, you did that relatively quickly. Did that come into your consideration when you were thinking about the gap?
I think, like I say, there were some other elements coming into play for me at that time. I didn't know whether the marriage was going to last, so I wanted to give Sophia a sibling. And that definitely played a part. I did also think maybe it is easier just to get it out of the way. and then I can refocus on my career as well, in say the next 5 years. Whereas if I delay the second baby, that's going to be
Totally.
pushed back. I'm going to be going back to work for a little bit, and then so my career did come into it a little bit too. But interestingly, so when I met my husband now, Kyle, I was so desperate to have a baby with him. He doesn't have kids, and I you thought he was the love of my life, which he is, and I was so desperate to have a child with him. And he said to me that he'd been married previously, but he'd never wanted children with his previous wife, and I was the only person that he would have ever wanted to have kids with. That said, for whatever reason, the timing wasn't quite right. And in my head, there was no way I wanted to get pregnant after 40. I know a lot of people do that. That's great if that suits you. But I had my kids in my 20s. And for me, I just had an issue with that. I've given up so much of me for my kids, especially because I've been a single mom for many years. And I just feel that, it's time for me to go and shine, basically, because I've not had a chance to do that for many years. And
Yeah.
so I absolutely was considering having a baby with Kyle, and that would have meant that at the minimum there would have been a 10-year age gap between Sophia and the baby, and right up to being probably a 13-year age gap. So that's something that just didn't work out for us. Either the timing wasn't right for him, and then by the time it was right for him, I was like, I'm not sure I want to be doing this now. I kind of gave you a cutoff. My cutoff was really, it was 37, honestly. And so I've now passed that, and I'm not sure that I want to do it for me, because I know that that's going to massively impact my life, at least for the next 5 years or so.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I mean, that then I've got like a 16-year-old and a baby, which to me, that's just not my bag. That said, I read about mums. I mean, I don't know anyone personally with that age gap, but I read about mums all the time. I see them on TikTok. They've got huge age gaps between their kids. Maybe they had their first child as a teenager, and then they're having another one in the late 30s, and there's a 20-year age gap. And
Oh
so I
yeah.
guess
Yeah.
it's whatever works for you. All this age gap thing is all very well if you are in a stable relationship with the same person. That's what this age gap thing a lot of the times I think is based on historically in a societal context, because the traditional family was a man and a woman getting married, and that was it. We don't know what was going on behind the scenes. I'm sure it wasn't all wedded bliss, but that generations past was how society viewed families. But obviously, women don't have to stay put in relationships they're not happy in these days. There is such a thing as divorce, and there is such a thing as maybe never getting married, or choosing to have a family in a different way. And so because of that, it's always it's sometimes not as simple as, oh, I'd like to wait 2 years or 3 years between my children. Well, that's fine if you fit the traditional mold, but many of us don't. And so then you may not have a partner. It may not be the right time career-wise for you. And so there are so many factors that go into this decision, aren't there? It's not just one thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not even taking into consideration that not all families are from, a pregnant woman. Like maybe you're having to use a surrogate. Maybe you're
Absolutely.
navigating IVF.
Yeah.
Maybe you're dealing with secondary infertility, which is a big thing where you have a child and then you go in for that second and you're having troubles having that baby. There's a lot of reasons why gaps happen, and sometimes they're chosen, sometimes they're not. A lot of times it has to do with your family and your situation. I think for a lot of families, what it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to is what is the current priority for us? Like what do we want our family to
Yeah.
look like,
Yeah.
and what's best for us as a family versus like what you might have thought. And a lot of that does have to
Yeah.
go into, like you talked about, your career plans and what kind of retirement you want to have and your longevity of your life. It's not so much as babies turn into adults. It's like when you get a puppy, it's like, oh, what a cute puppy. Well, eventually that's just like a
Yeah.
dog. And it's like you bring in a baby and it's like one
Yeah.
day that's just some dude named Paul. Like you have to consider the longevity of it. And so, um, yeah, I
Yeah.
think your priorities make a big deal. And it's not that you pause completely on your career. Like there's a lot of women who balance motherhood and working, but your priorities have to be balanced if you're having a situation where you have a young child and a really thriving career. You kind of can't do both at its highest potential, I feel. Because something on some day is going to go up or down, and we have an episode about that we will reference. But yeah, I think your mental health is important. One thing that I got a lot of when I was kind of holding off on having that second one is, oh, well, it'll be really hard right now, but when they're older, it will be so great. And I think that the older generation might have had that thought, but now in today's society, mental health is being so thoroughly discussed, and women are prioritizing that, I think, in a big way that they haven't before. And even though there might be a hard season now, and maybe when they're older, that might be easier, the season we're in matters. Your mental health right now with the existing children matters.
Yeah, it does. And let me just pick up on that point. Mental health of teenagers is at an all-time low. So just because you're out of the hard baby toddler stage and the tantrums and the sleepless nights, as I alluded to earlier, when your kids get into the teenage stage, the tween teen stage, there are so many aspects of mental health that come into play. And so I feel that I am as needed now as I ever was when the girls were younger. In fact, in some ways more so, because mental health can be a very, very serious threat to life. Let's face it. And and as the mum, I mean, I feel like the book stops with me a little bit. I'm ultimately, I feel, whether rightly or wrongly, responsible for my kids' mental health. I certainly need to be helping them through any issues they may have. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a long haul thing. It's not a case that, we'll have the babies quickly, it's going to be great. And then they don't need like babysitting anymore, so I can go out for dinner and this and that. Well, yeah, you can, but there are other things as well.
There are other things. Well, then your mental health as a mother, like that matters so much about if it's really hard and you have a newborn. I see a lot of women who have like 3 under 4 or like, 4 under 5. Like they'll have back to back to back to back kids. And I think that's wonderful if that's what you want. But I always think, how is that mom doing mentally? Are they okay? Because that's a lot. That's a lot to take on. They need so much from you. Not that they don't when they're teens, but there's a lot of practical, logistical stuff that they need from you, like breastfeeding and diapering and all the stuff.
Getting out of the house.
Yeah. It looks like a full-on circus. You've got...
And can you imagine having 3 at that stage? I mean, because of your age gap, you already have one toddler, but can you imagine having... Can you imagine?
No, I can't. I cannot. I see...
Born and maybe a 4-year-old.
I cannot. I see women who have twins, and I'm like, bless you, my sweet darling, because that must be so damn hard. And oh my gosh,
one of our listeners, she's called Rachel. Shout out to Rachel. She's also an old colleague of mine. We work together at the same radio station as journalists. She has triplets. Rachel, I don't know how the heck you do it. Triplets. She has 3 boys. Rachel, I hope you're done. I think you probably are. I don't know how. I think probably 3 is enough for her, but she has 3 boys. And every time I see a post up on Facebook, I'm like, oh my God, how does she do it? I'm in awe of how she would even get out of the house and how she's even mentally, sane. Because can you imagine?
I cannot. Crazy. That gives me anxiety just thinking about it. But, again, getting back to your situation, like your motherhood is so different than so-and-so's motherhood over there or whoever. There are women I know who just love the baby stage. They just love it. They couldn't get enough of the baby stage. There's other women who are like, can I skip forward to when they're 4 or 5? It depends on what you're wanting. Yeah. And I think that you have to kind of abandon the age gap, like, ideal, because it doesn't even make sense. Like the idea of the playmate situation, for instance. Say you do go to get to your gap. there's no guarantee that those kids aren't going to fight like hell and hate each other their entire childhood and like not be close as adults. Like there's no guarantee. My kids are 8 years apart, and granted we have a developmental, situation with Stella. My oldest is on the autism spectrum, so she's more into things that maybe a 4-year-old would be into. But still, they play together better than most siblings I see. They are like the first ones to sit down and play dolls, play kitchen. And what's a bonus is my older one knows how to be gentle with the younger one, whereas maybe a 4 to 2-year-old, they don't know that. They are like very rough against each other. So there's no guarantees. You should just do what you feel is best for your family.
Yeah, I wonder, because you've done a little bit of research on this subject for us, haven't you? What is like the societal kind of norm? I mean, what have you found out?
Yeah, I mean, so when I think about like what is the ideal age gap, and when I was doing research for it, a lot of the research I came up with was what OBGYNs think, because there is quite a toll on your body when you go through pregnancy. And so a lot of doctors recommend, waiting a certain amount of time so that your body has time to heal, especially if you're recovering from like a C-section or a pregnancy that might have been harder. A lot of the research I gathered said kind of a consensus of about 18 to 24 months being the minimum. Like, you really don't want to have another one before 18 months.
So do you mean getting pregnant before then? Or do you
mean, So, getting pregnant when your first one's maybe a year and a half would be an ideal for an OBGYN. That being said, I mean, there's a lot of women who go on to have very healthy pregnancies, and they have what's called like the Irish twins, where they're like back to back, like literally they got pregnant when they were like, I don't know, a month postpartum. You just never know. But I think a lot of it needs to be about what you want. You mentioned age. Age is a big factor. Women these days are waiting longer to have babies. And so by the time they have their first, they may be 35 or 33. Are they going to have 4 or 5 kids if they're starting at 35? It just depends on where you're at, and also cost of living, financial reasons, safety reasons. I think there isn't one size fits all. It kind of has to be about, what do you want your life to look like? For me, I think 2 is wonderful. We've shared on the podcast, I went for a 3rd and that didn't really work out. And I think that might have been a blessing in disguise for me, because I just really enjoy 2. I would have loved a 3rd. I would have loved that baby so much. But I really enjoy the balance of having 2 parents, 2 kids. When one's crying, the parent that's not holding the crying one can comfort the other. There's a lot of time and availability for one-on-one time, like I mentioned. And I just overall enjoy that I get to do everything with the first one and then do it better, maybe, on the second run. Like, I'm a PTA mom, I mentioned in the beginning. Did my first bout with the PTA. And then in another couple of years, I'll have the PTA again. And maybe I'll have learned a thing or 2 and I'll be a better like PTA mom. Who knows? I get to have that availability of like growing.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to hear from our listeners as well. What's the age gap between your kids? And if you're considering maybe having another baby, what's going into that thought pattern? I'd love to hear from you. Because like Christina said, I mean, there isn't a one size fits all. It should be on a individual basis. And I guess what we're trying to say is, don't feel pressured by society or by whoever else. Ultimately, it's your decision. You are going to bear the brunt of the pregnancy, obviously, and going forward, it still very much falls on the shoulders of the mum. And so that needs to be a personal decision that you're comfortable with, and really, forget about what people are doing around you. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Momversation Club.
And if you've enjoyed today's show, which we hope you have, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach even more moms and build a stronger village.
Until next time, bye.